Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, welcome back to Elson and Paige Talk Canada Reads. Today we have our first ever guest on our podcast.
Wow.
Welcome, Rob.
Yay,
Hey everybody, it's a
Rob.
pleasure to be here.
Yay. So Rob is my partner, and he's joining us for
Fiance.
this week's episode, my fiance.
Yeah.
So he's joining us because, when I saw the long list and the short list of the books, I was like, oh, well, really, it was like the champion. Rob like watches his podcast, so I was like, oh, and then I saw that the book was like hockey related, so I was like, oh, do you want to like read it and take part? And he was like, yeah. So
Mhm.
here we are. So why don't you get us started with like a little bit about the champion and the author?
Yeah, 100%. Well, the
In the
champion's
book.
someone who I'm very familiar
Oh,
with.
and here's the book. Sorry, I guess we should introduce the book. This is Searching for Terry Punchout. There we go. Perfect. Okay. All right, go
By
for it.
Tyler Hellard. Yeah, so the champion is someone who I'm very familiar with. Steve Dangle Glynn, a social media personality who's been on YouTube for, the last decade and a half at least, primarily doing Leaf fan reaction videos. So basically, he responds to every single Leafs game and provides a video reaction, win, lose, or whatever else. And if you know the Maple Leafs, you know they haven't had a whole lot of team success in the past 50, 60 years. That ties into this book as well. So Steve Dangle, a committed Maple Leafs fan.
Speaking of dangling,
That's
the
good.
poster.
Go ahead.
He is Steve Dangle, a loyal, committed Maple Leafs fan, and he's turned his Leaf fan reaction and personal YouTube channel into a whole media empire, essentially, where he has the Steve Dangle Podcast Network, 5, 6, 7, 8 different shows on the podcast network that are weekly, some are daily, and he's really done sort of like his own little independent media empire, primarily based around hockey and other sports.
Yeah, so he's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the
Seriously.
author, Tyler Hellard, originally from Halifax, but grew up in Summerside, PEI. And if you've ever been to Summerside, they call it a city, but I wouldn't.
No.
And that's not to take anything away from it.
No.
It's a beautiful place. It's just not very big. There aren't very many
Yeah,
people
hey.
there. There's not a whole lot going on, you know? It is a small town on the East Coast. He went to school at St. FX, which is in Antigonish, which is on the northern mainland of Nova Scotia, almost up Cape Breton. Now he lives in Calgary with his family.
Yeah, and what were you saying about like how many copies of this book that was sold?
Yeah, well, it's an older book, originally published in 2018. And he kind of thought it was dead. He wasn't selling any copies. And then he found out that it was announced as one of the Canada Reads books for this year. And he said he sold more copies in the last 3 months than he had in the last 8 years combined.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's really the power of Canada Reads. I mean,
Absolutely.
Seriously.
like, if you look at all the best-selling books right now in Canada at independent bookstores, like if you look at the top 10, it's like half Canada Reads, half Heated Rivalry series. So
Yeah.
it's like very like interesting to see the impact of that. And I think we'll probably have touching on the rivalry later on. But maybe
You're
we
a natural,
can
Rob.
yeah, you're doing great.
Thank you.
So we got our posters. Like shout out to CBC for sending these posters.
Yeah.
There's Mr. Dangle right there.
There he is.
There's the rest of the lovely champions. Big
Yep.
sweet poster. Thanks again, CBC, for sending us these.
Yeah.
And they have been as well. Thanks to CBC for featuring us on there. They have like a list of community events associated with Canada Reads, and they reached out to us and asked if we could be included, and we were like, heck yeah! So we have been included. So that was a pretty cool moment for our podcast.
Yeah,
too. So
exactly.
thanks to them. So do you want to maybe do a little like synopsis or summary of, or like what will be on the back of the book for Searching for Terry Punchout?
Sure, yeah. No spoilers yet. So this book is about this guy named Adam who's returning home to his small hometown in Nova Scotia called Pennington. I was curious if Pennington existed. It's not. It's fictional, but I'm sure that it's based on any kind of small town in Canada, pretty much. So yeah, Adam's returning home, and he's a sports writer who's been kind of having some challenges being a sports writer. So he wants to revive his career, and so moves back home for a bit to interview his father, who is Terry Punchout, who he doesn't have a close relationship with, but interviews him because he's a former professional hockey player. who's known for his kind of fights and just being a tough guy on the ice. So also known as a goon, maybe. I don't know. I feel like maybe Rob, you can explain more what goon means. Yeah, that's kind of the high level, and sort of goes between the past and the present in terms of his childhood and his relationship with his parents, and then to the present, kind of his relationship as he reconnects with different people in his hometown.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it's a shorter book. I think it was like 207 pages or something.
Yeah.
So it's funny how I think on this year Canada Reads, it's like either the books are around like 200 pages or they're like 400 plus pages.
Yeah.
Like, so not, and so that's like something to consider because it was a pretty quick read. You could read it in a day or a few days or depending on how much dedicated reading time you have. So,
Rob, did you read it in a day?
Yeah, no, I read it in about 3 hours in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. I was shocked too.
Yeah, no, I'm not a big book reader. I don't read a lot for pleasure, not fiction anyway. I do read a lot of news and Wikipedia and documentation and stuff for work. So I read a lot, but I don't read a lot for pleasure. So this was the
Yeah.
first book in a long time that I actually got to sit down and read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, usually at this point in the podcast we'll say like spoilers ahead. Do you want to talk maybe a bit about the book or like kind of maybe anything moments that like stood out to you?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that first of all, hockey is really more of a setting in the book, more of a theme than it is a book about hockey. Hockey is really more of a backdrop for the personal relationships and sort of the complicated, emotions and interpersonal issues that are going on in this family and between the people and the things that this guy's experiencing emotionally going back to his hometown, small town Nova Scotia. So if you're looking for a book that's about hockey and detailed hockey games and playing hockey, it's not really that. But it is very well written, and hockey is throughout it. It's the whole place, takes place at a bar, in a rink, or a Zamboni room in a rink, or they're talking about being at a rink. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Like I think this is like a good gateway, or like this is why I was like maybe you should read it. Like before I had read it, I was like, oh, hockey, why don't you join us? And it was almost like a gateway into learning more about this, it was a backdrop. So it maybe people who aren't fiction readers, this might be a good way to get them into reading. And hockey is obviously in Canada is a very big thing, and a lot of people are interested in hockey. So yeah, it was a pretty Canadian kind of book.
Yeah, it's interesting timing with, I feel like hockey's just been on everyone's lips like for the past couple months between like the Olympics and then rivalry and now like this Terry Punchout book and
for sure.
And all kind of different, like they're different lenses and perspectives, and I feel like people have learned a lot about hockey culture and can learn about hockey culture in this book as well, despite it being a backdrop. Just from different perspectives. So this was a debut novel as well.
Yeah, and I tried to look, but I don't think he's written any other books.
Not that I could find.
No. So it's sort of a one-off. Yeah, and so it's like set in Pennington, Nova Scotia. I don't know what it is about it, but it reminded me of like Antigonish.
That was the first thing I thought.
Like I don't know if it said geographically where it was, but I know it was like an hour and a half from the airport, so that sort of gives you like radius. And I don't know, what made you think it was Antigonish?
I don't know, just sort of knowing that the author went to St. FX, and then thinking about small towns that have rinks, because honestly, there are a lot of places in Nova Scotia that are so small they don't have rinks.
Yeah.
A lot of really small rural fishing villages and areas that don't have rinks or grocery stores or schools or anything like that. So it really narrows down the number of towns that it could be in Nova Scotia. And Antigonish is sort of a hub between Nova Scotia on the mainland and Cape Breton. And there are a couple of rinks there, one really old rink, one newer rink. There's St. FX University there. They have a rink. So that was the first place my mind went to when you said a small town with a newer rink. That's the first thing that jumped to mind.
What do you think, Alison? Did you have like a town in mind?
I mean, I think what I noticed in this book, and it kind of reminded me of Jenny's Boy as well, like there wasn't anything distinctly Nova Scotian to me about Pennington. So it really could have been like any small Canadian town, I thought.
Really? I kind of disagree, actually.
Oh yeah, tell me.
It felt
Why?
pretty Nova Scotian to me. Like a lot of the, not even necessarily, they didn't really describe a landscape or anything, but I think the way people interacted and talked. There was this line that was talking about people moving out west, and I think it was something along the lines of, to people in Nova Scotia, out west is anywhere between Toronto and Japan.
Yeah.
And that's a very like Nova Scotian sort of mindset to me.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like small town. It's like if you're not here, you're out west.
Yeah.
We've heard that term out west all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's like, it did feel like the interactions between people felt pretty Nova Scotian. I mean, that being said, it's not like I've lived in a small town, in Alberta or something, so I don't really know what that's like, but it did feel like Nova Scotian in a way.
Yeah, I
in
feel
that
like it would
sense.
be different, like Alberta. Yeah, and maybe it just felt like small East Coast. Maybe it wasn't. I kind of wish. I guess. Yeah, they mentioned Halifax a lot and stuff, but
Yeah.
I would have liked to see like a little bit more of like a Nova Scotia flair. But maybe that just wasn't really important
Yeah.
for this book.
Yeah, and there's a pretty short book, so it's like there wasn't that
Yeah,
much room for that, I don't think.
it felt like the right length to me too.
It was the right, I felt it was the right
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
and I thought what you said was interesting. Like the three of us are not from a small town. We're from
Yeah.
Halifax.
Halifax. Yeah.
Pretty much. And yeah, I thought that it was interesting. I'd be curious to see someone from a small town read this and be like, does this feel accurate? Or, I mean, the author himself is from a kind of smaller town, but I like
Yeah.
the contrast between, Adam coming back thinking like, oh, I left and, I got
Yeah.
out and did all these worldly cool things. And then coming back and seeing all these people have stayed and kind of trying to struggle with that judgment. And I think it was his friend Dave who was talking about like the boomerang and the stick.
Yeah.
And like, boomerangs are really like awesome. Like, just because we're here doesn't mean like we're not, happy or content. This idea that you don't like need to leave to make it. Some people are
Yeah.
very happy to stick around. So I thought that was a cool perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And like he definitely came in feeling like he was a hot shot, or like acting like he was one when he came back, but knowing, he had all his stuff in his car, he didn't have a job, like, he was struggling with that a bit.
So much
And
substance consumption, like so much like drugs and alcohol. It's
I
wild.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also kind of pretty
Nova
East
Scotia.
Coast, Nova
Yeah.
Scotia, and like a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I feel like Rob, like, your perspective of like played hockey for a long time,
Yeah,
and you have these dynamics of like people you play hockey with, people you went to high school with, like reconnecting with them sometimes, and like, having nicknames. That was like
Yeah.
that I'm not super familiar with. Maybe like, what did you think about the nicknames? You felt they were pretty accurate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not everyone has a nickname in a locker room, and most of the time it's not like a made up nickname. It's just like some version of their name.
Yeah.
That's not really something that I've experienced a whole lot with hockey culture.
So back to Panda Reads. This is on the short list. Very different than all the other books. I find this year like there's all the books are very different.
Yeah.
I
did find that this book had some similarity to, it made me think of a little bit of A Minor Chorus,
Yeah,
which I know
that
they're
too.
very different, but they're both like people going home to their small town and interviewing and talking to people from their past.
Yeah.
Which I didn't expect to make a connection between these two books because I just assumed they'd be just completely different. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
I actually thought the same thing, except this is much more like the language
It's so
is very
different.
Yeah. If you just said a man going from a big city back to his small town, you wouldn't know which one we're talking about.
Exactly.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So generally it's pretty different. There are some same themes. I think there's a lot of like themes of like strained family relationships this year in Canada Reads. But yeah, is this a book every Canadian should read? Elson, you wanna?
Yeah, I'll start. It is like a relatively short read. It's a relatively straightforward read. I do think like the hockey culture theme is, because hockey is such a huge part of Canadian culture, it is an important thing for people to understand the less glorious side of it. I mean, you see Harry Punchout is kind of quite a sad character, and you see, the hockey heyday was so different for athletes today, like the amount of money they make and like how they're treated and all that sort of the opportunities. So there's kind of like a reality, and that is probably the reality for a lot of hockey players. Like you don't make the NHL and you're not instantly a millionaire necessarily, though maybe sometimes you are. So yeah, it's not just about hockey either. It's like that kind of small town perspective, which I think is a good perspective to be sharing with people. And yeah, I don't know if I would lean towards more yes than other books
Yeah.
on the shortlist. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I found it very readable, like read in a day, read in 2 days or something. And like a lot of dialogue. It was like interesting. I really like when he was interviewing his dad and
Yeah, I like
those
that part
parts.
too.
I found those were the most interesting because he was talking about like, the behind the scenes of like his time in the NHL, how he got there and how he moved around the teams and his relationship with his wife and all of that. So I found that interesting. And then yeah, where hockey is a hot topic right now. Like it always is a hot topic, but now I think especially so with all the things going on. I guess the only thing was as far as like Canada reads and like being a book everybody should read, like it was a bit maybe one note kind of.
Yeah.
Wasn't multi-dimensional like a lot of the other
Agreed.
books on Canada reads. So I think it wasn't really complex, I think,
Yeah.
and it didn't have like layers of like things to consider maybe, and I don't know, like a complex plot. It was sort of very straightforward, which is
Yeah.
good because I think a lot of people could read it and enjoy it. But yeah, that was my sort of kind of holding back on
What do you think, Rob?
Yeah. It was a very short book, like you said. Very, very easy to read in a short period of time. So it's really easy to consume, which is awesome. It's easy to get through it. Um, I like the story. That being said, I don't think it's a story that hasn't been told before. I think this whole sort of man who sort of failed in the big city and coming home to find his family and friends is sort of a tale as old as time. Really, it's something that we've all experienced in a way, whether it's a story that's been told to us or something we've experienced ourselves. I don't think that takes anything away from the book. I think it's a very well written book. I think it is something that people should read. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And
Yeah,
yeah, just because it's been
that makes
told
sense to me.
before doesn't mean it's not
for
worth like
sure.
reading again. But yeah, maybe it isn't like, absolutely mind blowing in that sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that was very
Um,
insightful.
in terms of the more specific theme, a book to build bridges.
Yeah, what do
What
you
do you
think?
think?
I mean, that's sort of the entire theme of this is the man rebuilding the bridge back to his father.
Yeah.
They spend a lot of time talking about sort of what he thinks when he sees his dad for the first time. When he opens up the door and his dad is hunched over and he can't use one of his hands and he's grumpy and doesn't know what to say.
He's
And
in just like one tiny
he
room.
lives at the rink in a
Yeah.
room with no
Yeah.
windows. And
Yikes. Yeah.
and just that being a starting point, knowing that you haven't talked to someone who was a star 20, 30 years ago, and you haven't spoken to in 10 years, and that's your first reintroduction. It's
Yeah.
sad, but at the same time, he sits down with them and they work through it the whole way. And I think that is the essence of building a bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah,
he's
that's
gonna stay
that's a-
there? Think he's gonna stay in Pennington?
I don't know. It's hard to say. If he gets a job writing for hockey, he probably won't be able to. That's not
Yeah.
a writing for the Nova Scotia Junior B Hockey League is not a big circuit, I don't think.
No, I guess he was offered a job at JJ's at that
Yeah.
record, whatever,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Yeah.
doesn't seem to like JJ very much.
Yeah,
So.
they do.
But yeah, I think Rob, you summed it up well. I think that's kind of the bridge.
Yeah, it is building a bridge, like
Yeah.
that's like lost connection with a family member.
Yeah, starting with something that you don't expect at all, and then rebuilding that familiarity, and at the end coming to maybe just an understanding or some sort of mutual feeling where now we've rebuilt some of what we used to have.
Yeah, and also building a bridge between like where I said my favorite part is like where we heard about Terry Punchout's career in the NHL from the horse's
That was also
mouth.
my favorite part. Yeah.
And so building the bridge of he was this hot shot in Toronto in the NHL and he's like royalty
Yeah.
in the town, and just hearing his side of things was super interesting too.
For
Like
sure.
building a bridge of that understanding. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah. Do you think it
Not a
builds
book I
bridges
would
on a bigger
typically
sense?
pick up.
Like what?
Sorry?
Do
What?
you think it builds any bridges on the bigger sense, like outside of the book? Like, do you feel like it could build a bridge to like inspire people to like all the same footsteps of like reconnection, or do you think it's more just internal to the book? Yeah.
I was
What did you say?
You.
You.
I would say it's very internal to the book.
I was
I
just going to
think
agree with you.
it's
Yeah.
hard to think about this book as having a bigger meaning more than
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
written on the
Yeah, that's
pages.
what I'm saying.
It is very well written, but like I said, it's easily digestible. You can read it in a morning without thinking about it too much. It's very entertaining,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's very introspective in
Yeah.
the sense that it left me thinking about what it meant.
Yeah.
I
And
feel
I
like
think
it's similar
yeah.
to It's Different This Time, which is the romance book we read in that
Yeah.
sense. Like I feel like Foe and A Minor Chorus and The Cure for Drowning had these bigger meanings behind them, whereas these two, I think, you read them and you enjoy them, and then that's kind of it.
And I think it's hard for an author to find a balance between introspection and an easy read.
Yeah. Making it like people can connect with it, but also making it like, yeah.
Or in this case, where you have a very clear story to tell, there's no need for simile or metaphor. You just lay it out there.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
You just lay it out there. Here it is. Yeah, lots of dialogue. Lots of there's some humor for sure. There were definitely some funny parts. There are definitely some funny parts. So so I appreciated that for sure. I kind of also wonder like what people who haven't grown up in Nova Scotia and spent time on the East Coast, how they felt about this, because I feel like I was almost predisposed to liking this more because it's Nova Scotia.
I think so too. I think I would have felt differently about it if it was a different province or something.
If it was like Saskatchewan or something, I think I still like would have liked it, but I think it just like made me feel a little more warm and fuzzy
Absolutely.
that it was like Nova Scotia. Yeah.
Agreed.
So we're definitely like a bit biased in that sense. So yeah, it builds bridges in a sense like internally in the book, I think is what we're kind of thinking. And but it's
Did
not
you have a
it's not
favorite
like
character?
Yeah.
You.
A favorite character? Oh, wow. I wouldn't say real. I mean, Adam is the narrator. He's obviously the main character. He's our protagonist. The whole book is through his eyes, other than when he's, interviewing his father, who's speaking for himself. So I'd say Adam is probably my number
Yeah,
one.
kind of me too. Like there wasn't anyone that I was like excited to see. Like there was, some minor characters. Like there was Dave. I never got a sense of what Dave was going on with Dave. I'm like, are they friends? Are they not? They hate each other. They like each
I didn't
other.
understand why JJ was paying Dave.
I still don't know.
Yeah.
Like I assume like drugs or something, but
Yeah, something nefarious. I just don't know.
yeah, obviously nefarious. Like, and then there's Jennifer. So
It almost like gives Adam a reason to stay, like that potential, like will he, won't he stay, and that's like a reason.
Kind of, yeah. Like past flame. I guess that's like a classic. Like go back to your hometown, run into your past flame.
Yeah.
Like that's like just classic. Like that's just
Yeah.
classic. So and she was like fine. I wouldn't say she's my favorite character or anything.
No, she's not in there.
No.
I didn't really like anyone. Like I didn't be like,
Yeah.
I really like this character,
No.
No, there's no one who I really, really connected with in terms of personality in the book. But I don't really think that's what it's about. It's about the relationship between Adam and his father and trying to get this story written. That's the book is really centers around that, as Adam's trying to write this story. He doesn't even know if they're going to publish it once it's written. He doesn't even know if his dad is going to want to do the story because he hasn't talked about this in so long. He's been out of the spotlight. And I think really that's what it focuses on. It's not as much about character development or the characters in the book as much as it is just that relationship and the relationship.
That's very true.
So do you feel like this is more of like a study of like a character like Adam, or do you feel like it was more of like a plot driven sort of thing? Like either one of you, like either of you have thoughts. Like, are we kind of like, would you describe this as a book that's like about a character or is it about plot?
I think it's about like what Rob said. Like, I mean, even the title, Searching for Terry Punchout, like that's literally what it's about. Like he's like trying to learn about his father and rebuild that relationship, and so it's like searching for who he really is and understanding him better. So I think that's the focus, or it's that I guess it is the relationship between those two characters, and everyone else is kind of just like a side
Yeah, exactly. It was very
Show.
much like a lot of side characters. I guess I also was a bit confused. I think there were maybe too many of his friends. Like I kind of lost track of who was who.
For sure.
Like, there was like 4 or 5 of his buddies with all their nicknames, and I think I just got a bit confused at the
Can't
beginning
believe
when
his
they're all
nickname was Shitty.
Yeah. Rob says he knows somebody.
I did know
Like
a
that
guy in
nickname.
junior high who they called Shitty.
Good
Yeah.
lord. But yeah, there were a lot of
He's
like
been
they all
out.
kind of felt they were very one note. They all felt the same, right?
Oh,
Except for
definitely.
maybe
Yeah.
Polly, who like was a little more like it's slightly different. But Mac and Shitty and Dave, well, Dave was a
Yeah.
little different, but they all
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
had one note to them a little bit,
Yeah. So we probably could have done without one of the friends.
probably. Yeah. So this is, I guess, that's the last of the 5 shortlist books.
There was like 2
Um,
other things on.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I was just
One
waiting. Your
was
hand
like
was.
another thing that I wanted to bring up was, how when they were interviewing, or like not that Adam was interviewing his dad, it was like I don't still have the ebook or anything, but it only showing his dad's responses to
Yeah.
Adam's, which I really liked.
Yeah.
I thought that
cool.
was interesting because it wasn't broken up, but it was almost like we had to decide what he was saying or like what Adam was saying. And then it was the guy, was it like Yuri or something? Or like the guy that he like fought with,
The Swedish
the
fellow,
Swedish guy
right?
who
Who he
he
hurt.
hurt his hand on, who was really hurt. And I really liked how that was written and how we didn't really know what happened, and we ended up kind of finding out
I'm
what
so
happened.
glad we found out what happened. I was
I was
gonna
like,
be
are they
like,
not
you
gonna
gotta
tell us
say. Yeah.
because I really want to know.
Yeah.
And
I also
then
like that too. Yeah.
I thought that was like a really interesting way to write it. I liked it. Like I liked that. And then the other thing was the sort of hot topic. Is there were 2 hockey related books on the long list this year. One was this book, and one was Heated Rivalry, and they're very different. They sort of both have hockey as a backdrop.
Mhm.
And we've all seen the show, and like yes, it's like hockey as a backdrop. So like, how do we all feel about this book getting picked over Heated Rivalry? I'm just saying picked over that in the sense of I mean, Heated Rivalry didn't make it to the short list.
I mean, Here Rivalry has had enough spotlight and fame and it doesn't need more of that.
Agreed.
I do think it would do well. Like the themes do well actually.
100%.
But I think, like you said earlier, Rob, Terry Punchout, the book has sold more in the last 3 months than it has in the
which is really nice.
last 8 years. So I think it's an opportunity to spotlight a lesser known author and lesser known book. So yeah, I guess that's my first thought when you asked that. And what do you two
Absolutely.
think?
Yeah, no, I think Heated Rivalry is having its time right now on the international stage. I think people around the world are watching and reading that. And not only is it a book, but it's also been made into a full TV series, and they're working on a sequel right now. So I think if we're talking about a book that Canada should read, I think Heated Rivalry is something we have read and experienced. And I think a book like Searching for Terry Punchout by a small author is something that we should read.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do like when smaller authors are featured because they like first their sales and I think that's always really, really nice to see. Versus like I think we also have really surprised me as I hear Rivalry on the long list because we're like that's kind of already famous at that
Absolutely.
point. Why would we need to? I mean,
It's already a sensation.
yeah, and I think some amount, whether it's spoken or unspoken, what Canada reads is that it's usually small or lesser known books.
Which is what I like.
Right.
Like you and
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you and I read a lot, but it's amazing how much our reading is influenced by like what's put in front of us in terms of like bestsellers, and it's very curated. And for you and I reading a lot, and then Canada reads, there's most of the books we don't know, which is great. And
Which
so
is a good
it's nice.
thing.
Yeah,
It's a
which
good
is a
thing.
good thing. So
Like, even between the 2 of us, we read so many books like every year. I mean, I think in the past 2 years, you haven't read any of the books on the long list, like previous to knowing them. I'd read like one last year, one this year. Out of like each year, there's like 15. So it is nice to So I guess basically we're kind of saying that we're okay with the fact that Heated Rivalry wasn't picked, and maybe it's better that Terry Punchout was picked. if we had to pick between the two hockey books.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a good perspective, Paige. Good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I know that, there's just been so much discussion about the rivalry and hockey right now. So I think it's not a bad thing to have this book on the list for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. What do you when Mr. Dangle is going to be talking about this book on the week of Canada reads? What do you think his number one thing will be to say this is the book every Canadian should read?
I think there's going to be a lot of relatable themes. Number one thing, there's a lot of reference to the Toronto Maple Leafs, which I think is really going to be relatable to a lot of people in Canada, a lot of long-suffering fans, a lot of people who have never known success in their lifetime. And that's something that they sort of talk about in the book. I think that's something that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And then just an overall sort of feel-good story about this guy going home and reconnecting with his friends and his father, and learning things about why his dad might have acted the way he did 20 years ago, 15 years ago, why some things were the way they were, for better or worse. And I think that's a good story.
Yeah. And there's definitely something to be said about the fact that it's this father-son relationship versus mother-son or mother-daughter because of toxic masculinity, not talking about emotions. So I think if he wants to delve into that, it might not be a bad idea. Just bring up those kind of topics as well. And masculinity and hockey culture or toxic masculinity. So
it's a very man-focused book. Man.
Yeah, it is very man.
Yeah, no, it's the setting is hockey in the 70s and 80s, and hockey was very different at that time than it is now.
Yeah.
A lot more pugilistic, a lot more Wild West-like, a lot more self-policing, vigilantism type stuff going on, and a lot of people getting really, really hurt, but having that sort of culture of not being allowed to be hurt physically, emotionally, mentally, at all. You get out there and do your job every night. And sometimes
like
your job
hockey.
is fighting 2 or 3 times a night. And that's just what you go do 80 times a year. And that's really, really tough work. And I think that's something that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's almost like hockey sometimes concentrates some of the, is a concentrated space for some of those more toxic masculinity kind of things. And really puts a microscope on some of that. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Paige, I did want to related to that. I wanted to ask you, how do you think Terry Punchout's going to fare compared to the other books?
I could see it being middle of the pack right now. Personally, I would consider it to be the 5 books that kind of middle of the pack. As far as enjoyment, and then probably with the themes, it kind of sort of weighs more towards a book every Canadian would read versus having much social impact of building bridges. I could see it being but also again, just really depends on I think this Dangle guy, he's gonna be pretty good at making arguments
For sure.
because he's been making arguments for the Leafs for 15 years. So if he can do that, then he can probably do some arguments for this. So I could see, because I've heard this podcast, and I think he knows how to talk and how to make arguments.
And without reading
we've
the other
got some really good champions this year.
Yeah, without reading the other books on the short list, I would say that this is a book that's very accessible to all Canadians. I'm not sure what some of the other books are written like, but this is very, very easy for any Canadian to sit down and read and understand some of the themes that are going on and relate to them. So I think this book is extremely accessible to Canadians, and that's why Canadians will read it.
Yeah, I think it might be the most accessible because of the other shorter ones were a little more convoluted, Bow and Minor Chorus. So it's short and readable.
A little bit, yeah.
Versus it's different this time. It's very readable, but it was 100+ pages. So
it kind of reminds me of Jenny's Boy a little bit last year. This small town Newfoundland. That one did go out first, but I actually do think that the champion this year, Mr. Dangle, will actually probably do a better job of advocating for this book. So last year I felt more confident going in and being this one's going to go out first. I think, one of these two is going to win.
Yeah.
I think this year it just kind of feels a little up in the air, honestly. So
yeah. Me too. Me too. I'm not like
I mean, I
confident
think
who
The
would
Cure
win.
for Drowning is actually going to do very well. I think people are
I
going to have a
think
hard
so.
time arguing why this isn't like just an amazing
Yeah,
book,
but
but
you
I'm very biased.
never know. There's been some shocking eliminations before.
I'm
So you
done. If
never
The Cure for
know.
Drowning goes out first,
I
I'm
don't
here
think
for
that'll
it.
happen. I Yeah. Yeah. So
Well, this was fun.
yeah,
Rob,
Yeah.
you're
thanks so
great
much for
to have on
joining us.
Thank you
here.
for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really are really glad that you came.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
enjoyed being here. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Especially with
Yeah.
you had some really good insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
he's our your resident hockey guy.
Hockey
So
guy. Yeah, Rob, it was great to have you. So I guess, this is our last video on the short list. The debates are April 13th to 16th or something like that. So that's when the champions will go through and battle out, see who's going to be the winner for Canada Reads 2026. We'll do one more video as kind of like a recap at some point, kind of just recap the year and how things went and all the books and stuff. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, it always goes so quickly.
yeah. If anybody who's watching has any requests for topics for our last video of this year, just let us message us, comment, and we'll kind of we can maybe incorporate them or your thoughts, and maybe we can share them, and
Yeah.
and some hot takes. Maybe anybody have any hot takes?
We'll have
We'd
a
love
hot
to
take.
discuss those. And thanks again for listening
Yeah.
and watching.
All right. Happy reading.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.